Karapaluas were practically exterminated by uncomprehending neighbours into whose domains they were driven. The tribes lived in strict isolation that was rarely broken except in the cause of war. Primitive people that they were, they regarded their territorial rights as sacred. When New Westminster was for the third time swept into the Silver Sea by the floods of the generous wet season, the pioneers abandoned the site to the crocodiles and jabberoos and devil crabs and went in search of a better. Next, they founded the settlement of Princetown, on the mouth of what came to be called the Caroline River. In wet season, the river drove them into barren hills in which it was impossible to live during the harsh dry season through lack of water. Later, the settlements of Britannia and Port Leroy were founded. All were eventually swept into the Silver Sea. During wet season, which normally lasted for 5 months, beginning in November and slowly developing till the summer solstice, from when it raged till the equinox, a good 80 inches of rain fell in such fertile places on the coast as had been chosen, and did so at the rate of from 2 to 8 inches at a fall. As all these fertile places were low-lying, it was obviously impossible to settle on them permanently. In fact, as the first settlers saw it, the whole vast territory seemed never to be anything for long but either a swamp during wet season or a hard-baked desert during the dry. During the 7 months of a normal dry season, never did a drop of rain fall, and rarely did a cloud appear. Fierce suns and harsh hot winds soon dried up the lavished moisture. It was beginning to look as though the land itself was hostile to anyone but the carefree nomads to whom the Lord gave it, when a man named Britain's Wilnot found a site of what came to be the town of Port Zodiac, the only settlement of any size that ever stood permanently on all the long coastline. Indeed, the only one worthy of the name of town ever to be set up in the whole vast territory. Capricornia covered an area of about 500,000 square miles. This site of Wilnot's was elevated and situated in a pleasantly unfertile region where the annual rainfall was only about 40 inches. Moreover, it had the advantage of standing as a promontory on a fair-sized navigable harbour, and of being directly connected with what came to be called Wilnot Plateau, a wide strip of highland that ran right back to the interior. When gold was found on the plateau, Port Zodiac became a town. The site of Port Zodiac was a corroboree ground of the Larapuna tribe, who left the bones of most of their number to manure it. They called it Mailunga, or the birthplace, believing it to be a sort of Garden of Eden and apparently revering it. The war they waged to retain possession of this barren spot was perhaps the most desperate that white men ever had to engage in with an Australian tribe. Although utterly routed in the first encounter, they continued to harass the pioneers for months, exercising cunning that increased with their desperation. Then someone, discovering that they were hard put for food, since the warring had scared the game from their domains, conceived the idea of making friends with them and giving them several bags of flour spiced with arsenic. Nature is cruel. When dingoes come to a waterhole, the ancient kangaroos, not having teeth or ferocity sharp enough to defend their heritage, must relinquish it or die. Thus civilization was at last planted permanently. However, it spread slowly, and did not take permanent root elsewhere than on the safe ground of the plateau. Even the low-lying mangrove-cluttered further shores of Zodiac Harbour remained untrodden by the feet of white men for many a year. It was the same with the whole maritime region, most of which, although surveyed from the sea, and in parts penetrated and occupied for a while by explorers, remained in much the same state as always. Some of the inhabitants were perhaps amazed and demoralized, but still went on living in the way of old, quite unaware of the presumably enormous fact that they had become subjects of the British Crown. That part of the coast called Yarrakumbunga by the Aborigines, which lay about 150 miles to the east of Port Zodiac,